The golden glow of the late afternoon sun filtered through the treetops, casting long, amber shadows along the cobblestone sidewalks of Charleston's historic district. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. It was one of those days where everything seemed both timeless and fleeting, perfect for a quiet moment of celebration. Eliza Rowan, 36, moved with purpose but without hurry. Dressed in a cream-colored oversized sweater, relaxed jeans, and soft suede loafers, she looked like someone who had just come from a small bookstore or perhaps a painting class. Her brown curls were loosely tied back, and her face held the calm serenity of someone grounded in something deeper than appearances. She wasn't heading anywhere fancy for herself. Not today. Instead, she was simply hoping to secure a reservation at a restaurant that had once meant something to her and her husband, the Summit Room, an ultra-exclusive fine dining place nestled on the corner of Society Street, was where she and Daniel had shared their very first date nearly 15 years ago. Now, after years of growing together through both hardship and success, she wanted to return there, quietly, to reserve a table for their upcoming anniversary. It was meant to be a surprise. Daniel was often busy traveling for his architectural firm's sustainable housing projects, and Eliza, an art therapist, spent most of her days working with young trauma survivors. But today, her pottery session ended early, and she thought, why not walk over and ask in person? As she approached the grand exterior of the Summit Room, she paused briefly to admire the ornate windows and the way the chandelier lights inside flickered like stars trapped behind glass. Inside, diners dressed in tuxedos and flowing gowns conversed quietly over wine and plated perfection. Every movement seemed choreographed, every whisper intentional. Taking a breath, Eliza stepped inside. The cool, conditioned air met her warm skin. The receptionist, a sharply dressed woman named Clarissa, stood behind a marble-topped podium with a practiced smile that faded slightly as she took in Eliza's casual appearance. "Good afternoon," Eliza said warmly. "I was hoping to make a reservation for next Thursday evening. It's for a special anniversary." Clarissa maintained her smile, but glanced Eliza up and down before responding. "I'm afraid we're fully booked through the next 8 weeks." Eliza nodded, unfazed. "I understand it's busy. I was just hoping something might be possible for next Thursday. It's where my husband and I had our first date. I'd be happy to leave a deposit if needed." Before Clarissa could respond, a sharply dressed older man in a navy suit swept past. "Clarissa, what's the holdup?" he asked briskly. "I don't see the bottle I requested, and my usual table looks like it hasn't even been reset." "Of course, Mr. Barrington," she responded smoothly, clearly flustered by his presence. He turned toward Eliza briefly, eyeing her with a thin smile. "New policy, letting in walk-ins straight from the farmer's market?" he asked, only half joking. Eliza offered a soft smile, choosing not to react. "Just here for a reservation, not to dine today." "Oh," he said with exaggerated surprise. "My mistake. I thought you were. Well, never mind." Clarissa gave a tight laugh and turned back to Eliza. "I'm sorry, ma'am, as I said, we're booked out. Perhaps try one of the cafes down the road." Eliza tilted her head. "Would it be possible to speak with the manager? I'd just like to ask if there's any chance of cancellation lists or—" Before she could finish, another staff member, a tall, stern woman named Meredith, approached. Her tone carried authority. "Is there an issue here?" "No issue," Eliza said politely. "Just trying to make a reservation for next week." "Madam," Meredith said, her voice firm but polished, "we do require our guests to align with the atmosphere of the Summit Room. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." The words stung, not because of the rejection, but because of the quiet assumption embedded within them. "I see," Eliza replied softly. "So it's not that you're full. It's that I don't look the part." Clarissa's expression froze. "That's not what was said." "But it's what was meant," Eliza said gently. "I understand. Thank you." As she turned to leave, Meredith gave a small nod to a young man nearby, who stepped forward. "Please see her out," she said under her breath. "I can see myself out," Eliza said with dignity. The young man hesitated but followed her to the door, clearly uneasy. Outside, the warm breeze did little to ease the rising tightness in her chest. She stood there for a moment, eyes closed, gathering herself. Eliza rarely cried, but this wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of having your character weighed against a superficial scale and found unworthy. She pulled out her phone and texted, "Change of plans. Can you meet me outside the summit room?" Within moments, a reply came. "Already a block away. Be there in 2." She looked up just as a sleek silver-gray luxury car rounded the corner, stopping with barely a whisper in front of the restaurant. The man who stepped out wore no tie, just a fitted navy blazer over a crisp white shirt. His dark hair swept back, his presence quiet but commanding. Daniel Rowan wasn't one for flash, but his name carried weight in Charleston, not because of his fortune, but because of the homes he designed for communities that had been overlooked, for shelters rebuilt after hurricanes, for schools that needed a second chance. He smiled as he approached her. "You okay?" Eliza nodded. "Just not how I imagined this going." Before they could say more, the glass doors of the summit room opened again. Meredith stepped out, her expression immediately changing when she saw Daniel. "Mr. Rowan," she said, her voice suddenly bright. "We weren't expecting." "No, you weren't," Daniel said calmly. "And neither was my wife, apparently." "I believe there was confusion," Meredith stammered. Daniel's tone was still gentle, but now it carried weight. Confusion is when you misplace a booking, not when you judge someone's worth by their clothing. Clarissa had also come outside now, visibly pale. "Mr. Rowan, please, if we had known." "You didn't need to know," Eliza interrupted. "You just needed to treat every person like they mattered." Inside, the restaurant had gone still. Curious faces peered through the glass as Daniel gently took Eliza's hand and guided her inside. They stood in the foyer, quietly radiating a presence that required no introduction. "Would you like a table?" Meredith asked meekly. "No," Daniel said, "but I think a few of your guests should hear something." He turned to address the room. "Some of you saw my wife turned away just now. Not because of her words or her actions, but because of how she looked. I wonder how many others this has happened to. How many moments like this we let pass because it's not our problem." A few diners looked away. Others nodded silently. Clarissa looked down. Meredith took a step back. "I didn't come to shame anyone," Daniel continued. "But if this place is going to call itself a summit, then maybe it should rise a little higher." He turned back to Eliza. "Want to get pizza instead?" She smiled. "Absolutely." As they left, something shifted in the room. A few diners stood. One woman applauded softly. A man stood up and removed his napkin from his lap, saying to his wife, "We can eat somewhere with values." The next morning, headlines quietly began to circulate online. Couple turned away from upscale restaurant sparks conversation on appearance bias. No names were mentioned, but the story resonated. 2 weeks later, Eliza received a letter from the young man who had been told to escort her out. He had left his job, enrolled in a nonprofit management course, and was applying for an internship at the community center where Eliza worked. "I want to be part of a world that sees people, not outfits," he wrote. And so, from one moment of quiet humiliation came something louder, a ripple of reflection. Not a scandal, not revenge, just a story about values, about choosing to see worth where others might miss it.